Welcome to the Abundology podcast. My name is Renee Spears, and I am so excited to be here with Cara James, who is an intuitive astrologer, which clearly means you're an astrologer, but you also have that gift of intuition and knowing too. So they go together like in a perfect combination. So I'm really excited because we have been hearing about, for the last couple years from astrologers, this January 12th, 2020, the world is going to end, conjunction in the sky, And so I really am so excited to hear from you, like, what is going on? Like, what does this mean? What planets are involved? All of that fun stuff. So I know that you have done a few webinars and classes about this already. So I'm really excited to hear specifically about this January 12th conjunction.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Renee. Thanks for having me on the show and getting to talk about this exciting topic. Yeah, everybody's been talking about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And if your people aren't really into astrology, they might not even know what a conjunction is.
Yes.
So a conjunction is when, from our limited view on Earth, two planets appear to be coming together. So they're in the same zodiac sign at the same degree, and their energies are more potent when they're lined up.
When they're lined up like that.
Yeah. So Saturn and Pluto are two of the big powerhouse planets. They're the change makers of the zodiac. And most of the big revolutions in your own life have probably happened through Saturn and Pluto. Even if you're not into astrology, these guys work on you in pretty powerful ways and help get you on track with your personal mission. So one way or another, that's what they're really about. But they may cause a little bit of upheaval in the
process of doing that.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, change, that it takes some upheaval sometimes for us to change.
Oh, absolutely, especially us stubborn ones. We need extra planetary energy to move us along. But yeah, it's been talked about so much because historically, now these conjunctions happen every 30 to 36 years or so, depending on retrogrades. Historically, we've seen massive change on a societal level. This is a catalyst moment that really sets the tone and the energy for the next 3 decades.
3 decades, yes. So I have talked about on my weekly energy update about these new cycles starting, these new 36-year cycles and 30-year cycles. I don't even know how many, 12-year, all of these new cycles starting about with the same energy then.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because they're starting, does this energy play a part in that? Is it part of the transformation?
It's an especially potent time because, yes, not only do we have Saturn and Pluto conjoining, we also have Jupiter and Pluto meeting 3 times this year, and we also have Saturn and Jupiter meeting at the end of the year. So yeah, most times, most years don't have this much action happening, and that fact that all of these things are coming together, it's
in the same year.
In the same year, and mostly in the sign of Capricorn, which rules authority, it rules our place in the world, it rules tradition, the patriarchy, all themes that we've been working with and we've seen kind of bubbling up over the last few years. Now it's go time.
Well, I'm excited to hear about the patriarchy, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then there's some other action happening outside of these conjunctions too. But it's rare that we have this much energy in Earth signs. We've got what we mentioned, Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter are now all in Capricorn, and we also have Uranus in Taurus, another Earth sign. So Earth represents our wealth, our resources, our abundance, so perfect for your podcast where things are shifting and changing related to distribution of wealth and power. That's one of the big themes of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction.
Is the redistribution of wealth and power.
Yeah, yes. That's part of it. Well, back in 2008, Pluto moved into Capricorn. Okay. And think about the big events of 2008.
I owned a mortgage company at the time, so clearly.
You were in business then?
Yes.
Yeah, more than most what was really going on. And Pluto loves to get in and expose what's really true. So, sure enough, moved into that wealth sector, moved into the housing market and showed what was really happening. And it wasn't that was the moment that it happened, but it was showing that underbelly that had been happening for years, and all of a sudden it came out to be exposed, to be healed. And that's really the high end of Pluto. It wants transformation, it wants healing, but it can be a bit painful
along the way. Yes.
Yeah.
So Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008.
2008, and it was in a powerful relationship then with the planet Saturn. So these guys have been doing a dance for the last bit, and so that was when they were in a square relationship. So there was tension between these two powerhouses. Then we go back to 2000, 2001. There was tension again when we saw the Twin Towers come down. So potent energies, just to kind of get a sense of how they work. Wow. And now they're meeting together.
And now they're meeting together once again. So what can we, granted, nobody can predict the future, but we have, that's what I love about astrology, is we kind of have a general idea, the types of things that can happen and the energy that is out there. So what can we as a society tend to maybe see during this time or experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're already seeing it.
We are already seeing it.
Saturn and Pluto have been moving together for a while. Yes, they'll be exactly conjunct on January 12th, but we see it on the political stage. We see power abuses. I mean, our own president is charged with abuse of power, so we see that theme present in society. Of course, this is a time of change in terms of our political leadership. We're moving into an election year, so power and control and what that looks like, who's allowed to have the power and be in power. Those shifts have already been happening. We had our first African-American president. We see women rising up into positions of leadership. So those themes are going to continue.
Great.
For sure. But sometimes things get a little bit more sticky before they get better. So we have that tense energy. If you think of Pluto as a volcano, that's probably a good visual to have, is that things are potent, percolating below the surface, and then things explode. And sometimes that explosion first looks destructive, right? It's a destructive energy, but new life comes from it.
Yes.
So we may start the year with that real tense energy, but something new is being formed, and it may take some time to fully see what it is. But sure enough, I mean, the headlines are
well, not just in our country, but we see it like all over the world right now.
Absolutely.
So many countries right now are having upheaval and rebellion and governmental change and...
Yeah, absolutely. And it's especially sensitive for the United States. So just like we have a birth chart, the country has a birth chart too. And we were born on 4th of July, so the U.S. is a Cancer country. And back when the Saturn-Pluto conjunction was in Cancer in 1913, that's when we saw the beginning of World War I. Back where these energies were very close to home. Now they're in the opposite sign of Capricorn. So they're still stimulating us in a very foundational way. And I'm not saying that is, that's the direction that we're headed in terms of war, but there is that sense of revolution and change on the horizon in a really deep way for our country. But yes, we see it. We're seeing it all over.
Wow, but it's fascinating that our country specifically, this is in our country's chart.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see, I was looking at the chart the other night for the U.S. and how these transits are stimulating it, and you can see how fear is heavy on our minds.
Totally heavy on our minds right now.
You can see how there's a lot of unpredictable energy related to aggression and power. I mean, it's just all over our chart. So not to worry anyone, but even just the Saturn-Pluto conjunction can bring up fear of war. It doesn't mean that's actually the territory we're going into, but it's stimulating
it's still that energy, that fear energy of, oh my goodness, what could happen?
What could happen, exactly. Well, and that's going to get a little bit increased here on Friday because we have our full moon in Cancer. It's at 20 degrees, and full moons already bring out emotion, big emotion. A full moon in Cancer brings out more emotion. Cancer is the most emotional sign. And this is also a lunar eclipse, and it's, of course, opposite the sun, but it also opposite Mercury and also opposite the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So it's just potent energy.
Oh my goodness.
So if your listeners are feeling extra emotion and fear and things getting stimulated around home and family and and security and what that looks like, it's just part of the time. We're really initiating into this year with this strong emotional energy for us to look at what stimulates us, what activates us, and bring it out to into the light of day.
Into the light of day. And it's a good thing to remember, even if it's good change, it's stressful. So, because I am, an optimist, and I believe everything works out for the best. Now, it may take a few decades for us to realize that it's the best, but any change can be stressful. So when it seems like we have war and our planet is on fire and all these other things, and all what you're talking about with the full moon eclipse happening on Friday too, just adds to that tension and angst of like, this is a big time.
Absolutely.
Big stuff happening.
Well, and when we look back historically, these Saturn-Pluto conjunctions don't always bring about aggressive energies. They do bring about change. So we also see technological advances come out.
Ah, good point.
We saw, we've seen agricultural revolutions, we've seen transportation increase, where now we have the east and the west of the country joined and more things can flow. And the last one we had was in the early 80s, and we saw that technology revolution, personal computers coming out, changing the way we communicate and connect with other people. So it's not always a harbinger of something really,
doom,
of negative.
Yeah, exactly.
Negative. But it's this sense of things are going to change and never go back.
Yeah. I talked a little bit on my weekly energy update the past few weeks, because we had some really good positive energy during that time with like, enjoy this time now, because we may not see a reality like this ever again, because here we are at the cusp of change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in society we kind of have a general idea what's happening. How does this affect somebody on a personal level?
Yeah, well, that transformational energy is showing up somewhere in each of our lives.
Right.
And if you know your astrology chart, of course, you can look and you can go to the outer edge of your chart and find the sign of Capricorn. You can look at 22 degrees and see what part of life does this show up in, what house, what does that relate to? So for some, their relationships might be getting stimulated. For some, it's career and their place in the world. For others, it's home and family. It really depends. And you don't have to be an astrological expert to know, because these planets are so potent, you already are feeling them, and you've been feeling them for a while. So if there's an area of life that feels heavy, constricted, limited, that's Saturn energy. Some depression, feeling a bit alone, that's Saturn. Areas, probably the same areas because they're traveling together right now. Pluto feels like intense pressure, like you're going to implode. Like if you don't respond to Pluto's call, you might die. It's that intense energy. So you may already go, yep, it's probably this.
I know exactly in my chart where that is. Yes.
It's hard to escape. And I think we have that general feeling in society. There's a heaviness in the air.
There is.
And it's showing up for us each in our own way. But the call here is around transformation. So looking at those places in our lives where maybe we've been a little slow. So let's say you've always wanted to write a book, Renee, and you've known since you were a little girl, yes, I'm a writer, and you've had that energy there, but you're like, I'll do it some other day, right. Next year, and then it's always next year. So Saturn is coming through. Saturn is the Lord of time.
Okay, I love that.
Saturn represents our limits. Saturn says, hey, you have an expiration date. You're not going to live forever.
Get on it.
Exactly. So Saturn is coming through in a powerful way because Pluto's involved, saying, now's the time.
Now's the time.
That thing that you've been putting off, you can't put off anymore. You have to look at where you've been limiting yourself and take a good hard look at it. And Pluto's going to bring its potent energy to make some shifts and change around that thing. So you all know where it is. You're like, yes, that thing I've been avoiding, that I've been sweeping under the rug. Now is the time. That's really what the planets, I think, are saying to us. Now's the time to step into your fullness, step into your power, step into your call.
This is fascinating because I would say the theme with my clients the past at least 90 days has been, this is the time. You need to step into the bigger version of yourself. You need to do this now. There's no more waiting. There's no more playing small.
Yeah.
So thank you, planets. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you. Well, and Saturn is all about authority, claiming your authority.
Claiming your authority.
Yes.
That's fabulous.
And the way we become authorities, it's not just going to school and getting a degree. It's the school of life, right? So most of us become an authority because Saturn's a really tough teacher. If I look back in my own life, Saturn was the planet pushing on me when I was in a marriage that was not serving me. I was in a job and career that was not serving me, and it came through and showed me all of those sticky spots, all those places that weren't quite working, right?
Right.
And so I became an authority around hardship in
Yes.
in marriage and personal life, and it's a whole long story, Renee, I won't get into it, but that's how we do become authorities, is that we have these challenging experiences that show us our own strength, and we're able to then leverage that and bring it to other people and help them with similar challenges.
And up-level our life to the next best, better version of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's part of this call.
That's wonderful. Well, that's exciting. So I think that sometimes when people hear about astrology and, oh my gosh, the war and the doom and all this, we forget about the other benefits of this, how it pushes us along on the life path and up-levels our life, asks us to be bigger versions of ourselves.
Absolutely.
So that's fascinating.
Yes, and Pluto is all about your soul's growth and development. So Saturn's coming through helping with the structural piece and, the time is now. How are you going to structure this? How are you going to make this happen? And Pluto's got that potent, you're here to grow, you can do it. You can do it. It's going to be intense, but yes, that up-leveling for sure is part of it.
Wow. So because I know there's some other things happening this year too that I want to talk about, but before we move on, is there anything else you want to add about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we're going to be experiencing here? It's on January 12th is the exact date, I believe, but you feel that energy for a while. This isn't like on that day is the only day.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much we could
talk about.
But yeah, I think we covered a lot of the energies that people will be feeling. One question I've been getting is how long?
Yes, how long
might people be feeling this? Oh, and I should say too that the potency here also depends on your own birth chart.
Okay.
So we're all feeling it in a big way, but if you have a planet around 22 degrees of Capricorn or one of the other cardinal signs, to get a little bit more technical, you may be feeling this even more strongly. So if you happen to have your moon getting activated, that deep sense of security in yourself, this is a more potent energy. So just so your folks know, there's a lot of variables here for how deeply you may be feeling it, and that will also relate to how long you might feel the energy. So
True.
I'm thinking of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction as that catalyst energy, but it's really going to be with us for a lot of the year in different ways. And we have Jupiter, who's now joined this now trio
party.
This potent party in Capricorn, and he's coming along behind, and he'll be bringing a little bit more lightness, a little bit more optimism, possibility, potential to liven the party.
I love Jupiter.
A little bit, yeah. So I think that will help, but we can really expect this to be a powerful year. So this is the catalyst moment, but it'll be with us for some time. The energy.
Now, if people, because I know a lot of people don't have their birth chart, so you can obviously come visit you and get a copy of the birth chart and go through it.
Yeah.
Also, now we have all these great tools online where you can just Google and you can put in your birth date and place and all that and pull up your birth chart.
Absolutely. Astro.com is a wonderful one. It's free.
Yes, free.
You can go in, create an extended chart, and then you just have to get a little familiar with
where the stuff is.
What the zodiac sign glyphs are and where things are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm also offering a webinar on Wednesday that actually shows people how to find the energy in their charts. So,
I love that.
So,
Great. I will there'll be a link to your website in the write-up for the podcast here, so people can find you and go to that.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so we had talked a little bit about this is an election year. A lot of politics going on this year. So I'm assuming that this is going to influence what's happening in the election coming up in November too.
Oh, absolutely. It is just a crazy, wild year, Renee. So this Jupiter, as I was mentioned, was coming along behind. It's making a conjunction with Pluto at 3 times this year. So Jupiter exposes the truth, and Pluto is that planet of power and control. So we have a lot of opportunity to again have secrets exposed, see power for what it is. Jupiter also relates to that Sagittarius energy, the foreigner, the other. So what we're already seeing on a world stage between our country and the Middle East, our own energy between us and border of Mexico, and exposing abuses there and what that all looks like in our government. There's a lot of potent energy to work with that. Now, ultimately, I'm an optimist like you, Renee, that it's all here for our greatest good. It's
Absolutely.
all here to expose what we need to see so that things can come to light and be transformed.
Absolutely.
But it will still be some tense energy along the way as these things come to light and get exposed. So that's happening throughout the year. And then I think we're going to have a pretty exciting election season. So, Mercury retrogrades 3 times every year. We're used to that. This last year, the final retrograde of the year was in Scorpio, and I don't know if you were feeling it in an intense way, but everyone I knew, Scorpio again is that Pluto energy. It's what's below the surface, and it was just a wild time where just random things, difficult things were coming up left and right. There was a lot of aggression and tension in the air. So that is the final retrograde of this year too for Mercury in Scorpio. And it ends the day of the election. So the few weeks leading up to the election are Mercury retrograde, times where communications and plans go haywire. And then with it being in Scorpio, exposing things that haven't been seen before.
Wow.
And then we have a couple weeks later in mid-December, Jupiter and Saturn are coming together in a conjunction. And this exact lineup of Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, very close to a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, was the same energy that we had in 2000 for the Bush-Gore election.
Oh my goodness.
And you remember how that went?
Oh yes, we remember.
What's going on? We had no idea. There's all this going back, rethinking, recounting. So there's some similar energy, secrets being exposed, this tension. There's this Jupiter and Saturn together bring this expansion, contraction energy. So there's that sense of what is this really all about? What's happening? So there's going to be some fireworks, if I could make a
Yes.
prediction, around this election.
And how fascinating that the Mercury retrograde is actually ending on the date of the election. Wow.
Yeah.
You can't make this shit up.
Yeah, and it ends in Libra, a sign of fairness and balance. So hopefully in the end, whatever craziness is going on,
Yeah.
will end on a positive note. Another interesting thing around elections that happen in years where we have Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions are, now, I don't want to get in trouble here. This is a time, Saturn and Jupiter conjunctions are a time when leadership often transitions. So if you look back historically through the times of kings, this is a time when, someone would step down or pass on or be ousted and removed, and someone new would come in. That same cycle, it just happens to line up Saturn and Jupiter conjunct every 20 years. So with our election cycle, every 20 years or so, we have another one. Historically, if we look back through the U.S. history, presidents elected in years where we had Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions often have died in office.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating, and I'm not trying, that's why I said I don't want to get in trouble. I
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
make any
no.
predictions here, but there's just an interesting pattern and energy when we look back. So all of these things really are keeping me on my toes, wondering how are these things going to be playing out.
Well, yes, because we have the Saturn-Pluto, that conjunction being in the U.S. chart, and then we have all of this other stuff, with the Mercury retrograde on our election and the cycles. It's fascinating.
It's going to be a fascinating year. I mean, this is a year that's going to go down in history books in some way.
Yes. And I have heard that about this time period right now, that this is kind of like a once in a lifetime that we as because we don't live, through all of these long cycles, experience and that all of this transformation. Do you kind of look at that the same way?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, it's fun to look at the politics and think about the big cycles societally, but the best way is to really figure out how can we work these energies for ourselves, right? So it's fun, it's fun to hypothesize and look at all of that, but how are we going to use this immense time in our personal history, right, for the greatest good? Now, I heard your energy update the other day and the focus on self-care. Wonderful advice, Renee. Wonderful. We really are going to need it. When you were sharing that, it got me thinking about that time in life when my marriage was falling apart and I had a young child and just so many things to consider. And I was standing inside. It was winter, and there was a whole storm brewing outside, just thrashing the trees, wind everywhere. I mean, just intense. And there was a heart-shaped balloon that had got tangled in this tree. And here I was in this very zen, peaceful, quiet, inner place, inner home, looking out at the storm outside. And I think that's the
balloon just
symbol,
whipping around,
the symbol of the heart getting thrashed around,
yes.
And being able to find those moments of stillness and looking at that. That might be a lot of the energy of this year, of needing to find that inner place of strength, resilience, as the world around us is thrashing about. I mean, there's going to be a million distractions from our personal call. We're going to want to get into it with our in-laws or our relatives that have different political views and this and that. I mean, there's plenty of hoopla.
Yes.
Right? But our call is to really develop that inner strength, stay focused on what's important, what's true for us. And we talked about Saturn being that taskmaster, that time-oriented planet. It's time to really roll up our sleeves,
yes,
and do the work that we're here to do. So these are our helpers to make sure that we get and stay on our
yes.
on our
This
true
is
path.
one of those years where you get a plan. And you're like, this is what I'm going to accomplish. It doesn't sound sexy. It's not a sexy year. Let's go off, and have all these vacation. I got a plan. I'm following the plan. I'm working the plan. I'm taking care of myself.
Yes, and Capricorn is very much that way, right? It's all about making a plan and being resourceful and practical and all of that. But it's also a feminine sign, being an earth sign.
Oh, nice.
So with the feminine, we get to go within.
Nice.
And so it's like, before you go out and make those big goals and make those plans, do the inner work, go within, let it incubate in the deep dark places of yourself, and then let it come back out to light.
That's perfect. That's great advice.
Yeah,
that's really good advice. Good, because that's for life. You don't want to just let's go for it. We can get much more from manifesting and all of that by sitting with it and visualizing it, and then putting it into action. They go together,
Yeah, absolutely. And that is more of the feminine way.
Yes,
and
it is.
And we see the benefit when we get to do that inner work first.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating, just absolutely fascinating. And I know that nobody can predict what's going to happen, but just even knowing what's going on out there and the potentials and what the energy is, and then knowing who the players are, in our government and other governments, and even in our life, our bosses.
Yeah.
So, even though this is on the big world stage, it's also happening in our individual lives.
Yes.
Our bosses, our landlords, or whomever are in similar situations. So I love that things are going to be exposed and come out to the light of day to be healed.
Yeah.
And it's been a long time coming for a lot of this stuff. And interesting that Harvey Weinstein's trial is starting today.
Oh my goodness,
I know,
you're so right.
I know, right in the middle of, or not in the, we're almost there to the time.
Yes. Oh man. Well, back in a couple years ago, when Jupiter, that exposer of the truth, entered Capricorn, that was when, entered Scorpio, that was when the Me Too movement got launched, right? So now it's moving into Capricorn, where we're getting serious about consequences in a way. But things got exposed when Jupiter moved into that sexual power control
Yeah.
sign area. So yeah, it's fascinating. I do think that that is one of the big benefits of working with astrology is you see these cycles. You have some framework to have interesting conversations, of course, but you can see these cycles. You can more deeply understand what the call is for you, and it also shows us how things are temporary. I believe we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, and it helps to be able to see that there's an end point. Yes, there's tension, there's something being asked of us, but there's some resolution in it too. And so we can see, okay, we're just in this great cosmic cycle.
Yes.
And we'll just keep flowing.
And we'll just keep on
flowing
going.
with it.
Yeah. And once again, a great opportunity this year to up-level our lives.
Yeah.
And take it to the next level, and that push of getting to the stuff we haven't done yet that we need to do. So
yeah, now is the time.
Now is the time. Let's end there with now is the time.
Now is the time.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate this. Has been such great information. I will put a link to your website, carajames.com, in the write-up for the podcast, and I would love you to come back in a couple months, and we can talk about what, because I know there's so much going on this year that you can't cover it in a half an hour.
Yeah, perfect.
And then get an update, and then also closer to the election. That would be mind-boggling to see what's going on, because we'd have more info then.
Oh, that will be so exciting. Thank you so much, Renee. I've loved being on your show. This is actually my first podcast.
Oh, my God,
thank
you're fantastic.
You are actually stimulating some of my Saturn-Pluto lessons by getting my voice out there. So thank you for being part of my evolution as well.
I love it.
By being on your show.
Gosh, for the first one, you knocked it out of the park, so great job.